Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today we have Tomas Wikowski joining us to discuss about LeSS framework. Tomas is certified Scrum trainer and he is an expert in LeSS. Tomas, please welcome to the podcast.
Oh, okay. Thanks for having me here, and thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to us.
So Tomas is a founder of Procognita, which is a agency which kind of helps with small to large enterprises in kind of delivering all their agile you know, uh, everything where you will be hearing Agile or Scrum. Thomas kind of is an expert in those areas and he helps companies with those kind of things. Thomas, please give a small introduction to us.
I guess you did pretty well. So I'm supporting companies mostly in Poland, but managed to be in few continents as well, in few countries, sharing the knowledge and supporting owners of companies, but also managers in changing their organization. So I guess you did pretty good work. So I'm not going to add anything to that.
Sure, Thomas. So, Thomas, let's get started. Please explain the fundamental objectives of LeSS framework to our audience, and let's spend a couple of minutes on how exactly does LeSS framework work.
A couple of minutes might be difficult. So let's start from this one. Is using framework less and less often, which is kind of fun in this context. So basically, the concept is the question we have in less, but the question we have in Scrum, the question we have in any other agile approaches is like you should have in any other agile approaches, like how do you make a organization more adaptive? Now, Scrum is pretty cool with that on the team level, but it basically leaves a lot of space for interpretation about the multi-team level, right? It's mentioned that you should have product owner, it mentioned you have a product backlog, and that's it. Basically, if it says that if you have more than one team, then you should have one product owner, one product backlog. That's it. That's the whole idea. So how do you do it on the scale? So if you're working on a company that has more than 5 people, which is most of the cases in those times, except when you're in a startup, then how do you do it on the large scale? And the thing is like it's not about how do you copy paste other people's methods. It's about how do you experiment to figure out what is the approach for you. So Les is asking you one difficult question at the very beginning. What is your, it's called optimization goal. So for your company, for your organization, what is the critical thing you want to optimize from the internal perspective? So it's not the business objective. It's more like a, how do you build your company? And there are different answers, and like speed could be important, or like utilization of resources could be very important for you, or like security of information can be very important for you. But many companies, they discover that what is important for them is adaptiveness. So I'm trying to avoid the word agile by now because most people has already their own definition of that word. But what we're looking for is like how easy it is for the organization to change the direction and focus on what is most important, right? And Les is basically looking at how do we do this on the organizational level. So not how we do this on the team level, which is Scrum answer, but how do we do this on the organizational level? So that is like a 5 minutes intro to, without saying any details. This is more like what kind of problem we're trying to solve.
Okay. So what I understand is like what Scrum is doing at a team level, the LeSS framework is trying to achieve the same on a multi-team level or at an organizational level, where you have, let's say, lots of teams working together. And interestingly, the most important thing is like there is a goal that you have to set first, like the organizational goal, not a business goal, but the internal goal, which LeSS will try to achieve. So it can be, you mentioned it, like it can be like increasing the velocity of the team or the overall deliverable quantity, as well as it can be some other details like making the like security aspects and all those things you mentioned, right? Okay, that's very
Yes.
interesting.
The only comment to what you just said is like if your goal is velocity or your goal is security of information, then less is not the solution for you. So if your
Okay.
goal is adaptiveness of the organization, then less is a good idea. If your goal is to go fast, then there are different approaches. So one of the things you discover when you start talking about, how do you create the organization is that you may discover that going fast is not the same as going as being adaptive. Because if you
Okay.
go super fast in one direction, but the
Mm-hmm.
cost of changing the direction is high, then you can say we're fast, but you cannot say we're adaptive, right? So imagine you have a let go, from abstract perspective to a real world case perspective. Assume you have 3 teams. One of your team focus on, let's say, European market. One of your team focus on, let's say, India market. One of your team focus on China market.
Okay.
And each of them are awesome in what they do. They learn how to do this super fast, so they're super fast in delivering what they do. Now, what you discover is like there's a huge opportunity in China next quarter. The question is how much effort you can put there, and the answer is most cases you can put one team to the most important item. So you're super fast, but your teams do not deliver what is most important. Only one of your 3 teams deliver what is most important. Adaptiveness means that you may be not so fast, but you're able to move 3 teams to what is most important. So in this case, what you say, well, I'm treating all 3 markets as a one big product rather than 3 separate product, and I want them. It's better for me to deliver slower, but what is most important? So it's better for me to have the ability to move all 3 teams to China market, even if this means they need to learn new market, new things, new skills, new context, all this stuff. It's still better for me to do a bit of what is important rather than a lot of what is not important. So this is the difference
And
between being fast and being adaptive.
that's very, very interesting. So what you're saying is being fast is just one quality, but being adaptive means, so in my mind, being adaptive is closer to being agile, where you are saying that you are watchful of what is the situation, the context, and based on that you align your resources, let's say your teams and all, instead of always trying to go fast and kind of, if sometimes you have to slow down also probably because you want to kind of reassess the situation and then kind of, put your resources or your teams to the use. And so would you say being adaptive is probably same as being agile in some sense?
And this is what I mentioned at the very beginning. I'm trying to avoid the word agile. I mean, the idea behind agile is basically, how easy you can change the direction, right? But the thing is that by 25 years, is almost November here. 25 years of agile, agile is here for 25 years, right? And so 25 years has overwrote the definition of agile, and everybody has their own definition of agile. So that's why I'm trying to avoid the agile word. Now I'm using the adaptive, but I'm using it in the same context the original agility was meant to be. Craig Larman is saying that if the goal would be the speed, then it wouldn't be called adaptive agile. It would be called speed, right? Fast, right? So yeah, the goal, speed was never a goal. I mean, what you need is to be adaptive. You need to know where you are. So you need to orient yourself in the market. So you need to have a fast feedback. But it doesn't mean that you need to deliver super fast. You need to deliver what is important. That's a separate story, right?
Interesting. Okay. What I have understood is like being agile, in a sense, as I already mentioned, right, since we are using this term pretty frequently and everyone has created his or her own perspective and meaning of this term. But being adaptive is more relevant because what you want to do is you want to survive in this environment. You want to
I mean,
increase your business, and agile is often, for some reason, kind of equated with speed, delivery, right? But there can be realistic situations where all you want to do is stop, first understand the situation, and not just keep on delivering or just delivering for the sake of it because you want to show your speed. That's, I mean, maybe this is not what agile meant, but probably, as you mentioned, in the last 25 years, agile generally means delivering a lot of things at great speed, right? even extreme programming and all those versions, if you see, right, they have always emphasized on don't do documentation, just keep on delivering more and more, right? So, but probably the speed thing has been resolved now. What we need is like business outcomes, right? And probably adaptability is where we have to go now. Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
so the adaptiveness is, it's not overused yet. So the moment we
Okay,
discover that the adaptiveness is now having a different definition, then we need to find another word in English, or you can switch to, another language. The thing is, like, if you do the search now in Google what agile means, then basically you will find anything, including firing people. So, going
right.
cheaper and firing, half of your team because of your teams because, it's better, it's gonna be cheaper now. This is the articles I've seen already. So if anyone wanna do this research and give us some comments on that, and probably after this podcast you can check Google or AI, whatever. But the question is, like, how do you create adaptive organization, which is a bit different from how you create a fast organization, right?
Interesting. So I think the first question that I'd like to ask on the same lines is like, how is less framework different from, let's say, scaled agile framework, right? Where again, you are trying to kind of create a release trains, employ multiple teams, and make all of them communicate, be productive, right? So what exactly is the difference that less framework brings, and how exactly?
All right. I was afraid of that question. Anyway, we're gonna go into the rabbit hole. The big difference is you start from the different place. So the big difference 25 years ago between rational unified process and Lightwell methods, including Scrum or XP you mentioned, was that XP Scrum was like a minimal list of ideas, and then you build on that. Rational unified process was coming with the long list of everything you need to do and just remove the items you think that doesn't work for you. You get exactly the same case right now with Safe, which is basically giving you more and more ideas. And I have no idea what is there right now because now I'm not kind of focusing on that. But anytime I open there or heard something about Safe, is there is more and more and more. So basically, what they do, they take something from other words, then copy paste with changing the meaning of those words, and you end up with having a bigger and bigger and bigger solution. It has nothing to do with the framework. Now, less is more like, what is the problem we're trying to solve and how we solve the problem, rather than what are the methods and how to squeeze those into one working framework. So one of the ideas is like, you ask the question, okay, if you know what is your goal, is, how do you make your organization adaptive? So there is a lot of system thinking involved into less in discovering, how you can make sure that you can have more than one team working on the most important item, which is completely separate question, because if you go to most of the Safe I saw is like, how do you make sure that those teams need to collaborate with each other to deliver something in one quarter? And for some companies, delivering something every quarter is a huge success. But this 2026, and if you're still unable to deliver, release every few minutes, every few days, then you have a huge problem. Let's say it's out there, right? So either you or your competitors will figure out how to do this every few days, and your quarterly planning will be basically, no value. So I understand that there are some companies that find a value in, quarterly planning, but the question is, how do we make sure that the team can deliver daily, not quarterly?
Okay.
And one of the things you discover is, like, most of the cases you discover that the structure of the organization you have right now is something that you need to change completely. So you have two approaches. When you discover that the structure of the organization is in contradiction to this optimization goal of adaptiveness, then you have two options. Either you ignore your optimization goal, or you change the structure of the organization. Well, one of the methods you just mentioned is basically saying, okay, we're gonna do this agile thing at the bottom of the organization, but we're not gonna touch the top of the organization, which basically means we don't wanna remove any dependencies between teams. We're gonna just track them using magic rope on the wall. We're not gonna make product owner the decision makers because they are not owning products. Because again, the question is what is the product, and again you open the organizational structure for most of the companies, and you figure out their products are basically the component of the system. And as long as you're selling components of the system, that's great, but most cases you sell software to the users. And if you go to users and ask the question, what is the product we have, then the answer will be completely different from what the organization is saying. As a consequence of that, the product owners are basically component owners, which means they have nothing to say about the priorities from the business perspective. So those people cannot prioritize the backlog on the organizational level. They can prioritize the backlog on how I make my team most efficient from delivering quickly parts of the feature, but not the whole feature. And this is when you end up having all those dependencies between teams, because you figure out that the feature goes through several teams. That is what many organizations have. And if you look at Scrum again, because most cases, most of the problems companies has is not about understanding LeSS, it's about understanding Scrum in this case. I know that, again, 2026, Agile is passé, Scrum is passé, everybody is doing it fine, except that most of the people have never seen Scrum in action. And Scrum says, build a cross-functional team that can deliver feature, not part of the feature, not the component, not the backend, not the frontend, not the whatever part of the system you have, but the feature end-to-end. And you discover that in a large organization, that's like a 50 different components you need to change to deliver any value. And you discover that to make it happen, you should have like 50 people in your team, which is crazy, right? So how do you do that? And this is exactly the question you're trying to ask. So not how do we make Scrum work on the team level and then put something over that to make the whole organization work, but the question is how do we make the Scrum works on multiple teams? And you discover that the product owner, as is meant in Scrum, that should be a person who makes a decision about the product, which is really case in SAFe, because you have a product manager who makes this decision. So the product owner basically is a backlog manager in SAFe, right? So again, it's a minor thing to give you an example, not to be too abstract, but the goal is basically, what is the problem we're trying to solve, how we can solve this problem, and you start thinking about, how you solve the problem. So start from the different direction than in SAFe.
Very interesting. So what I understand is like what framework like SAFe has essentially done is like you have this Agile and Scrum principles, you apply with all the teams, and then you are kind of, though Agile recommended that don't be ritualistic about things, we are still ending up being ritualistic. We have we know certain ways of working, ways of doing things, and we do it with all the teams, and then we kind of focus too much on tracking, communication, and kind of aligning releases and all, but not the actual problem. The main problem we are not kind of chasing, that's not, our core attention. And another interesting thing that I kind of grasp, just like when the product owner is creating backlogs, he's generally worried about the features and flags and all those things. But if you think about it, the main thing you have to worry about is how this feature will ship end to end, which means you have to worry about marketing, you have to worry about sales, you have to worry about documentation, you have to worry about customer education, and they all should be part of the backlog in some way. And but since the departmentalization or compartmentalization of the organization is generally such that people are only worried about their tasks and the whole picture no one is having in the mind, that is where, in spite of putting a lot of effort, things fail, because when you are trying to put this whole uh, you know whole structure together, uh, the main question itself is lost, right? Everyone is worried about, the sales team is worried about his sales targets. The Scrum team is worried about delivering as much as possible, as you mentioned. And but the business questions, right? Who is tracking that question? That becomes the main problem, and that probably only one person CEO is worried about, and the rest of the teams are kind of not worried about it to the same intensity.
Yeah, so the question to ask now, to discover how agile your organization is, like how fast you can discover that something is working or not working. So you have idea, and how fast you can discover that it's working. So how much time you need from the idea to getting any reasonable feedback. And the second thing is like how much you can put more effort into this one, right? So many times when you have all this not just all this heavy processes, but also you have all this project management processes upon that, then you discover that you have, even if you have great idea, then changing the direction of the organization takes time, right? And these are the questions you need to ask. So it's less about the structure of the organization, because this is what people find when they open Scrum Guide. Again, not even talking about the LeSS. When we open the Scrum Guide, people find that there are some roles, there are some events, or anything like that, artifacts. The thing is like, what are the consequences of those roles, events, and artifacts? And one of the consequences is that you need to move the responsibility to the team. You need to move the ownership to the team. The team should not be running with every single question to someone from outside the team, because that slows the team down. And you have exactly the same conversation on the organizational level when you try to do this on the multi-teams organization, right?
So, okay, so what I understand is ownership is very important when you are kind of not just less framework. If as anybody, any team in the world kind of is trying to deliver something, right, there should be a sense of ownership. But in agile world, the word ownership is not that given so much attention. In the sense, there is this team ownership where, as you mentioned, right, a team should kind of fully deliver a feature, and it should have a mix of people. But that ownership is still limited to features, but not like the ownership of the business goals, right? And somewhere that gets missed in spite of following all this modern agile and all those XP frameworks. And less framework focuses on ownership and ensuring that the business goal is delivered by kind of completely taking a fresh look at your organizational structure, realigning everything. Thomas, this realignment is always a difficult challenge, right? Because if you go and say sales should work like this, marketing should work like this, right? Uh, it's not very easy. Does less framework kind of give any ideas around that?
Okay, so let me turn a question around a little bit about this one. So, if you have a person that is responsible for a component of the system, part of the system, and even if you call him or her product owner, they're still responsible for the part of the system. They cannot understand the business context. They cannot understand the consequences of doing or not doing this feature. Their goal is to build this part of the feature. So you cannot expect those people to take responsibility about the value of the feature. They can take responsibility about from not delivering or delivering the feature. That's it, right? But you cannot talk about value. You cannot talk about responsible for increasing the customer happiness or whatever, right? Because they don't see the whole picture. So it's super, you can blame those people that they don't take the responsibility, but you don't give them the picture. So like, again, if you create something like a backend team, and because you have a huge system and you cannot create a cross-functional team, so you create a kind of system backend team, and then you complain those people don't engage on the reviews. Well, yes, because you go to the review and they don't talk about the business, they talk about the backend. So who cares about the backend? Certainly not your sales and not your marketing, right? So your sales and marketing do not show up on the review, and you complain that the other part of the organization do not follow the agile way. But the
Mhm.
reason is not because those people are stupid, but because the structure of the organization forces you to show something that is not important from the business perspective. But if your team would be going to review and showing a feature end to end, then you can have a good question from your sales or marketing perspective departments, and then you can try to answer those questions, and then you can take some of the responsibility. So it's not about people not interested in taking responsibility, but it's super hard to take the responsibility about the value if you're just supposed to deliver part of the system, or even if you're supposed to deliver the whole system, but you don't have to say how it's gonna be implemented because someone else make a decisions in some other department. So the problem is like in most cases the decision making and as a consequence of that the ownership of the problem is somewhere top of the organization. The concept in Scrum and the concept in LeSS is basically how do we move this to the team level so the team has a problem to solve rather than a feature to implement.
Okay, interesting. Very good suggestions. So basically, what I understand is like, so there's not going to be a fixed solution for these kind of things. Probably, as you mentioned, right, when you want to be adaptive and you see a situation based on that particular situation, that particular business goal that you're trying to solve, you will have to kind of keep reinventing yourself and organizational structure, keep making changes, keep probing people to kind of attend certain meetings or not, kind of be involved. Let's say you are focused 90% on your your team deliverable, but 10% mind space should be given to understand the overall picture. And there should be some forums where, let's say some people from sales, some people from marketing, some from development team can come together and kind of explain the urgency of those business problems. And then probably, priority prioritizations and all those things will happen naturally and automatically, is what I'm sensing. Correct me if
Okay.
I'm wrong.
And again, to stress out, this is not the consequences of having strange people in your organization who don't care about the taking responsibility. It's about the structure you have right now in the organization. People do the
Right,
best they can in the
right,
context you have, right?
right.
So if you see that people are not taking the responsibility, rather than trying to fix those people, try to see what in your organization caused those people to behave the way they behave. And,
Yes,
and then
we
you,
should not be kind of blaming people because they are probably trying to deliver their best. But since they are not in that context, they don't have the complete business picture. They cannot take those calls, right? Okay, correct.
And then the consequence of this one is like either you make a change on the organizational level, and by organization I mean either some department or the whole organization, depending on the size of the organization, depending what is the let's say like how much influence you have on the organization, and you make the change not just by renaming the people what they have on the LinkedIn, but more about how do you restructure the whole organization, right? As a consequence of that, again, like in Scrum, you discover all the problem you have organization has, all the bottlenecks, because again, what you discover, like you have a huge knowledge depth, for example, in the organization. You have just one person who knows what to do something in the organization, which is fine in most of the organization, but the moment you try to build adaptive organization and you want to have 5 teams doing something that is important, then you discover that basically you have just one person who knows how to do it, right? And this is the knowledge depth. And this has nothing to do with any kind of methodology. The only thing this has to do is like discovering that this is a problem for your organization and investing money into this one, which means basically time so people can learn, right? And again, don't blame people, see what is happening on the organizational structural level, and then discover, how to modify those elements. And then based on that, you can try see what kind of new structure, what kind of also new rewards for the people, for your teams, new way of hiring people, new way of transferring the information inside the organization. So this kind of related stuff, how does it impact the way people behave, and as a consequence of that, you will have a new behavior rather than trying to figure out why people don't take the responsibility by themselves.
I think it would be more holistic experience for all the teams involved also because they would be part of the entire picture. And kind of it's a cultural shift also in a way because you kind of when you start dealing with kind of multiple people and multiple, your involvement kind of changes, your engagement changes. Okay.
So what?
You know,
Yeah.
uh,
So
yeah.
I'm gonna just mention on this one because that's cool. One of the cool things that happen when you switch to this approach is that you can have a CEO, COO, product owner, product manager coming to the meeting with all the teams and saying, "Hey guys, this is the biggest problem we have right now in our organization. How do we fix that?" Right? And then we need to figure out if we're going to address with all the teams, with part of the teams. But the thing is, people start knowing what is the biggest pain in the back of the organization, let's call it. And most cases you don't have this information because everybody is busy with their own backlogs, but no one knows what is the most important from the organization, right? Because
Right, right, right.
everybody do what is important for them, but not for the organization. In this case, the question is what is the most important, and you can show it, and then you can ask the people question how you can, get involved into solving this problem.
Completely agree. Uh, so moving forward, some of the more things that I would like to ask you is like, how does customer centricity fit in this LeSS framework? What does LeSS framework say about dealing with customers?
So we're coming back. We're coming back to the to something we said before, right? So if you look at the Scrum, the goal is give people problem, move away, let them solve the problem, right?
Right, right,
And the problem should be either of your customer or your user, right? Sometimes
right,
they are the
right.
same people, sometimes they are different people, but basically the idea is like if the team is cross-functional, so they can, do this end to end. And by end to end, I mean anything from understanding the problem to validate that their solution is solving the problem, right? So this is designing the solution, this is implementing the solution, this is validating. If it doesn't work, then doing it again and again and again. So this is one thing. So as a consequence of that, you need to have this contact with the user or with the customer, because otherwise it doesn't work. But this is more like a consequence of how you build your organization. What is the problem you're trying to solve? So as a consequence of that, you have a customer centricity, because it's super hard to solve the customer problem if you don't know what is the problem. I mean, you can, because many companies do, but there is a separate team that analyze what is the problem, and the separate team that implement the solution. Sometimes there is also a separate team that design the solution, and there's a separate team that check if the solution is working. So
Right.
even if that works pretty well, then you still have a lot of knowledge transfer. You have a lot of delays, all this stuff happening. So if you know what is the problem for your customer for the next 2 years, then who cares? That should be working for you. But if the problems of your customer change every 2 weeks, then that might be a little too slow for your organization. Again, what is the problem you're trying to solve from the design perspective, right?
Okay, sure. Interesting. Okay. And how does LeSS help in increasing the, let's say, quality of communication across teams? Because LeSS is also supposed to be kind of helpful when we're dealing with large organizations with lots of teams, right? Even lots of remote teams, if they have, let's say.
Uh, Good question. Let me start from this one. If you start building teams around components, then what you discover is like to deliver a feature, then you need someone else outside those teams, because if you have like few components, then you have no single team that is responsible for the feature. And you end up with having like different coordinators, call them whatever you want. There are really trained engineers, there is kind of project manager, there is some, features owner, whatever. But you have someone else outside the team who need to take care of the feature. And what you discover, the team does not focus on the feature because they have a part of the feature, so they focus on their own part, right? And someone else, running around, depending on the power that person has, more or less influential. Most likely you have 20, 40, 80 items in progress as the organization. So you end up with 80, 40, this kind of people running around with different priorities, and all those people trying to push. And again, it's not that the team does not take ownership. It is like you just move away this ownership outside the team. So you assign it to someone else outside. So the concept here is don't do it. The team are responsible for providing solution to the users, and you move this to the team level. So coordination between teams is also team level responsibility. And one of the way we do it is we ask people to you are supposed to work on common code, because you may be adding features in the same code area. And as a consequence of that, you need to talk to each other, because otherwise you're going to blow up something that the other team is doing, right? And
Right.
one of the company lovely called it like a merge festival, because what they discovered is like at the end of the every sprint, all the teams were trying to squeeze all their changes at the same time. That that they were like 2 weeks sprint, and then first day everybody was trying to push their changes, and they discovered this doesn't work, because it doesn't work. So what you need to do is have a conversation between teams and say, hey, how we do it to avoid this kind of peaks of all the changes at the same time. So you have changes merge every few minutes rather than once per 2 week sprint. And you have this problem now to be solved as the team at the team level. So this is when you move this responsibility more to the team again.
Interesting. So what you're saying is the communication has to be done with the team within the team itself by the team members instead of kind of you know off offsourcing it to some coordinator, because even if they try their best, they will not understand the things at the same level at which the team which is developing the features will understand, because they are very close to the code, they are very close to the features, they know about the past. And so when they are kind of coordinating with the other team members, that coordination will probably be more effective and impactful. Okay.
Yeah, so what I'm always saying is like the moment you take owner the responsibility from people, don't blame people for not taking responsibility. And in this case, many companies, they create a separate coordination roles that take over the responsibility for the feature, and you end up with having less and less ownership of the feature from the team. So yeah, so as you said, those people need to talk to each other inside the team, but because this multi-team framework, you also discover that you need to go and talk to other teams as well, because they're working
Okay.
on the same code.
Interesting. Okay. Very interesting. And one question that I wanted to ask is like, how do you measure the success of your team when you're kind of going with less framework? What are the criterias or metrics that you can observe? Like in
Uh,
sprint, you have this velocity and all those things, right? Uh, should we continue with
so
them only, or less has some other
so
approach on this?
here's my recommendation. If you're still using velocity as your success criteria, don't, just stop. I mean, to anyone who is listening us still, I mean, it's like a half an hour already, so hopefully you are still with us. Just don't, because what you end up is you deliver what is easy to deliver, is you don't deliver what is fast. So let me just give you an example. You have a case. uh, let's assume that even we have like a super super simple situation. You have a one team, 5 people, owner of the company. Owner of the company comes in and say, hey, I have this great idea. And the team say, no, 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 because we need to refine it first, because if we take it to the team, the velocity will go down because we haven't refined it yet, so we don't understand everything. So it's better to take the items from the backlog, which were already refined perfectly, than the new items you have just come in, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
the only way you should measure the success is by money, basically. And in this case, what you discover two things. First of all, what you discover when you create a team that has no external dependencies, then you can just deliver faster. So one of the things that one of my customers said, something that would take us, the difference, the change they made, it wasn't yet Scrum. What they did is cross-functional team, really cross-functional team. That was a banking application, and what they did is like they create one team to see if it works in their context. So nothing about scale, nothing about many teams. And what I say, this team in 1.5 months did what we probably would need like 2 years to deliver. So that is speed, right? That is one thing.
Okay.
The second thing
Okay.
is you see that you're starting to deliver what is important. So from all the features you have, those 40, 80, 200 features you have, you start to deliver those few which are important, which is another thing you discover. And that is the moment when you can have a conversation with the senior executives, senior management, sales, marketing, because they don't care about your velocity in most cases. They care about money. And the moment you can deliver what is most important, then you can have a conversation with the management. What is the next thing to deliver? Because they care about this one, right? So if you go to review and talk about the velocity, then basically you miss the point. The goal is to talk about are we doing the most important thing right now? How do we know it?
Okay.
And what is the next most important thing right now with all the knowledge we have? That is the conversation you should have. Velocity is the metric that is just useful for the team to plan the next sprint, and that's it. Nothing more than
Interesting.
that.
So if we measure the wrong metrics, for example, like velocity, we can find a way to always increase the velocity, but it may not have real world impact on business. And teams may become more comfortable dealing with those things because they don't want to face the bigger and tougher challenges. And, which is not a good idea in the long run because we are not, programming or doing something for the sake of it, right? Eventually, it has to impact business. And even though they are tougher problems, they should be addressed first. We have to go through that, conversations, those confrontations, those plannings, even if it is not very kind of natural to us. Okay, that's what the point I'm understanding. Okay, very
Um,
interesting.
you get what you measure. This is my observation. So for most of the people, again, I might be wrong, but for most of the people I saw, they care about solving real problems rather than having a velocity. So if you go to the team and say, hey guys, you can either give a great velocity or solve the real problems, most people will say, unless they are, unless the bonus depends on velocity, most of people will say, let's fix the problem. But the moment you reward people based on velocity, then it's not people's fault. That's your fault that you have created this kind of organization, right? So don't blame people again. Coming back
Sure.
to this one.
Okay. Okay. I think we have kind of mentioned multiple times this don't blame people, focus on the organizational structure, change it, make it more adaptive, focus on the business problem, and not kind of be too involved in your own daily routines, you know, lose sight of actual business problem that you're trying to solve. Measure the revenue, business impact instead of, the lower level metrics like velocity and all. Some people should measure that, probably, let's say, team owners and all, because they want to keep a sight of it. But it should not be the metrics of conversation when you are kind of dealing with, let's say, sales, marketing, and other team members that, hey, we have increased velocity. It might be important to you, but if it does not have impact on business, probably we are kind of living in our own world. Okay. Okay, Thomas, I think uh, one thing I wanted to ask is like, where can we find more resources around this less framework and similar kind of concepts, which are going to deliver huge impact on business?
So you start with less.works site. So this is
Okay.
the first place to go. There's a lot of information about less. Um, um, I'm running a podcast as well,
Okay.
so you can watch some of the conversation I have with other less trainers. So different perspective on this one. There is this book. Let me try finding it now. Wasn't prepared for that question. Somewhere here, but I have no idea where by now. Oh, here they are. One, two, and I'm still missing. Okay. There are three books, and I cannot find the most important one, so maybe we'll add it later. Uh, so the most important book is called Less, Black One, 2016, I believe, and start from this one. If you find it fancy, there's like a 500 different experiments. So again, Less is not about telling you how to do it. It's like a different ideas you can find in those two books, and there's even more around that. So there are some ideas in the organizational design ideas. How it's called? There is a team topologies. No, sorry, the organization org topologies by Alexei Krivitsky and Roland Fleming. And the second thing is designing agile organization by Cesario Rasmus and God, we're gonna add his name later on. I'm sorry about that. So I'm plenty of places to start looking for, and then finally, if you find it fancy, then have a look for less courses. There are some courses, basically around the world, so you can find some information there.
Cool. And talking about books, Thomas, I believe you have also written a book, right? Can you tell us about that?
Oh, the book is in Polish, so not much for people who don't know Polish, and Polish is kind of superpower we have here in Poland because it's not an easy language to learn. Uh, the book is about, yeah. So one of the things I want to stress out today is most problem the companies have with all these agile approaches is basically they ignore most of the ideas from Scrum, and the book was like, what is the idea behind Scrum and how you implement it. So it's Scrum book again. So recommended for people who want to learn a bit about Scrum in Polish, but it's more from the why does it work and why it doesn't work. Because many cases, as I said, what do I see? People focus too much on the mechanics, not enough about the problem you're trying to solve. And I wanted to focus a bit more about, what is the problem we're trying to solve. And then, by the way, this is Scrum, which can address some of those problems.
Oh,
And I can show
sure.
I can show you it. I have it close here. So this is the book. I'm still trying to find a Scrum book, but there's a LeSS book, but I don't know where it is.
No worries. Maybe you can drop me the in the chat, and I will
Yeah,
kind
we'll
of
do.
link it
We'll do
later.
later on.
Sure. Sure, Thomas. I think it was very good session. We learned a lot about because we all have been working with Agile and Scrum for a long time. In my own experience, I have been working with it for more than around 18 years. But there is always something to learn and kind of to change your perspective to kind of reinvent yourself. And your suggestions, your ideas are definitely very powerful. I'm sure the people who are watching it will find it useful and they can relate to it, particularly people who are owners, or like say team leads and business people. They will learn like where they should put maximum energy, not into the ritualities, but how to kind of solve real business problems. Thomas, thanks for joining. Any
Um,
last words you want to say, and then we can wrap
yeah,
up.
yeah, and I believe that should be the first sentence in this podcast, but we won't make it now first, so it's gonna be the last one. One of the thing I've observed is like people say, okay, I'm not interested in less because we don't do less in this organization. And the thing is, less is about how you design the organization. So it's like it's good idea to look at those concepts, no matter what kind of organization you have, because even if you are forced to work in any strange kind of organization you have right now, the point is you will know why it is not working at least. Even if you don't have the power now to change it, still you have idea why it's not working. And some of my customer, they're going through the next wave of change because they don't have the power to change the whole organization. So they do a small change and then they do a bigger change and then a huge change. Well, I don't care if you want to use less or not. I do care if you want to learn why your organization is working or not working. And if you want to learn that, there's pretty good ideas, pretty good concept to find on the less works side.
Right. Sure. I think, yeah, that's the most important thing. Find out the problem and just solve it, right? Anything else is like, uh, you know, details. Right. Thank you, Thomas. Thanks for
Thank
spending
you
your
very much.
time. Kind of, it was great having you on the podcast.
Thanks again.
To all the audience, please do drop your comments, whatever you found useful, and let us know how you kind of, how have you tried if some of these ideas into your organization, whether they have worked or not, and what more you would like to kind of learn. Thank you.